Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. Good morning to all of those of you who are joining us live on Zoom, and good morning, good evening, or good night to those of you watching this after the fact. This is the first in our series of Backstage with Tech Founders, so I'm delighted to be joined here by Charlie Gleeson, who is CEO and founder of Zipp Mobility. I'm also joined by my colleague Esh Nagoya, who's our program manager, and she will take part in the interview as well. So without further ado, Charlie, you're very welcome to the MERITS building.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
We're going to dive kind of straight into your background, Charlie, if that's okay, and we'll talk a little bit about Zipp Mobility and the micromobility market. You went to school in Blackrock College. You went through UCD for your primary degree. I'm just curious, at what stage of your education did you decide that you really wanted to set up your own business and be master of your own destiny?
Yeah, well, I suppose I would love to say that it was as simple as just going to Blackrock College, doing quite well, and then getting into UCD, but it was a little bit of a slightly more rogue route. I wasn't very good in school, so I was just a little bit of a mess. I wasn't that interested, so I didn't do quite as well as I wanted to in my leaving cert. I kind of went into a higher certificate course in in DIT. So that's kind of where that was my first kind of third level education, and from there I started studying kind of practical elements of business, and it was something that really interested me. Nothing in school, the theoretical side of business never really interested me that much. So once I kind of got into the practical elements of it, I really dug in and really enjoyed it. And I suppose that's where I got my passion for business and entrepreneurship as well. So I kind of that was for 2 years, and I ended up doing okay in that, and transferred over into commerce in UCD. And then I suppose once I got into commerce in UCD, I felt that like a lot of people around me, they were kind of going down the accountancy and finance or consulting route. It was kind of, which one are you choosing, And it was I decided I was going to pursue a career in accounting. And I think just closer to the time, I got a little bit of cold feet. I always kind of fancied myself as an entrepreneur or someone that wanted to start my own business. And so I think just closer to the time, like when I was finishing up college, I kind of said, I'm going to try something for 3 months. I wanted to start a business for 3 months. And if it all worked out, I'd pursue it. So it was in my final year of college. I was kind of looking at different things, really interested in startups, always have been. And I started reading about the micromobility space. And when I was doing that, I was looking at companies, some of the larger Silicon Valley scooter sharing companies. And I was really interested by a number of things. One, the level of demand. So a lot of people were using scooters a lot more than they were using bikes, especially shared scooters. They were seeing like 10x demand of electric bikes or shared bikes, and I thought that was fascinating. And then I was also fascinated at the scale at which these companies were moving. They were moving into 50 to 100 cities in 12 months. And with both of those things, I was saying, geez, this is something... there was also a personal kind of frustration in Dublin with the public transport system. I was kind of saying, every day I'd walk to the bus, which is 3 kilometres, and then I'd get the bus into UCD, and I was kind of saying there has to be something that can fill these gaps. And scooter sharing just fit the bill. So I said, let's look into this a little bit more. And when I started looking into the industry when I was in college, there was kind of 2 things I found. One was that a lot of these scooter sharing companies were making a few mistakes. There were a few things that they could do a little bit better. And then secondly, I also realised the scooters were kind of illegal in Ireland and the UK. And where most people would kind of say, close the book on that one, scooters are illegal in Ireland and the UK, I said, well, if we can come up with solutions to some of the industry's biggest problems, by the time the legislation changes, we'll be in great position to win licenses. And I suppose that's where it started. So, as soon as I finished college, I dug into that full time, and thankfully over the last kind of 2 years, we've built something. It's starting to move.
Well, fair play. I mean, that immediately points to kind of one of your key strengths is obviously resilience. So we might come back to talk about that, because lots of other people in that stage would have researched the market, said, look, there's a legislative block, and moved on with their life and probably gone into something more traditional. So, I mean, kind of have that resilience to pursue, what you saw as the vision. Does that come from, is there any kind of entrepreneurial genetics, in your family? Is there an entrepreneurial flair from any other family members?
Yeah, I think so. I suppose my family business is a bar and restaurant, Gleeson's. It's in Booterstown. And that my granddad started that, so he was quite entrepreneurial. My dad and my uncle then took it over and have kind of really developed it from just a pub selling pints to a pub, a restaurant, put a deli on it, put bedrooms upstairs as a kind of boutique hotel. So they're always thinking about how can we improve this and how can we make the offering better and how can we bring in new sets of customers with, I suppose, from the same base. So I definitely think that I've had the luxury of watching that growing up. So that's been helpful. And then you kind of on the resilience is an interesting point. It's definitely, one of the most important things is to have a bit of patience when starting a business. And that's something I kind of learned over time is that, it was around like 625 days from when I put together the first business plan to when we generated our first pound in revenue in the UK. So it does take time. And I think that I was aware of that going into it, especially when I knew that, the legislation wasn't quite there. And when you're waiting for legislation to change, you can be waiting a while. So that was kind of one thing when it comes. And there's also an element of, when we were going into meetings at the start with investors, before we got going, they were kind of saying, well, you're starting a scooter sharing company. There's already kind of billion-dollar companies in this space, and scooters are illegal in Ireland and the UK, the two markets you're going after. So there's kind of that element of, okay, well, one, there's a little bit of maybe naivety, maybe stubbornness, but also the biggest thing is knowing your market. I was looking at the trends of scooters being legalized in France, scooters being legalized in Italy, scooters being legalized in Germany. It was only a matter of time before this was going to happen in Ireland. And when you know your market quite well, you can see things that other people can't. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So that was one thing, and also we knew that there was room for improvement in the industry. So those two things combined, knowing your market and then maybe a little bit of naivety and resilience as well.
Yeah, very good. I know, having gone through the startup journey myself, one of the key things that I advise everybody else now is getting good co-founders, getting good initial employees, building a network of mentors and advisors. So as you were building the company, that first 160 days and from business plan to revenue, just talk us through a little bit of how you built a team around you and what sort of people you used for advice and mentoring support.
Yeah, like I've definitely been lucky when it comes to like advisors and mentors. A lot of them are kind of previous employers of mine and stuff like that. But I think when it came to building our team, it was an interesting one. The first 12 months was kind of pretty much me by myself, a couple of people coming and going and taking part a little bit in the project. But essentially for the first year, it was just myself. And that was probably the toughest year, when you don't have people for the low moments and you don't have people for the high fives either. So that was a little bit, I suppose that was a little bit challenging. But thankfully, when we got a little bit of funding in the door, we were able to hire a few people. And we hired a kind of combination of some really, really strong graduates. So people that are just extremely clever and would also complement my skill set as well. So, we knew that, for example, tenders were going to be a big part of the early stages of our business, the tendering and formal procurement processes, stuff I had very little experience in. So we got, a lot of really, really strong graduates who, are great at that kind of thing. And then we also layered on top of that people with a lot more experience. So, we've kind of got a mix of young people with loads and loads of energy that are really clever and are willing to put in the hours. And then we've also got kind of, people on the team with, 20, 30, 40 years experience kind of, guiding the path as well. And just kind of, I suppose, drawing upon their experience and avoiding mistakes that way, So
sure.
It's kind of a combination of, very fast paced, younger guys and girls, and then, the more experienced guys kind of overlooking.
Very good. Well, I just want to, I'm sure you didn't mean the suggestion, but it is possible to have lots of experience and lots of energy as well, Charlie. So, no, look, that's good, and it's a key part, that building that team is absolutely essential. We find within our ecosystem, a lot of people try and go too far on their own, and, they just run out of energy because there's lots of highs and lows to running a business. So in addition to the legislative barrier, what were the other key challenges that you faced in the early stages?
There were a couple. I suppose the patience was one. Like it was really pushing a rock up a hill when you were, before the legislation changed in the UK. So that was kind of as a result of COVID. They wanted to get people, public transport capacity was in a lot of trouble due to social distancing. So they needed to get people moving in a socially distant manner, and legalising electric scooter was actually a government response. But before that, we were trying to get up and running, and what we wanted to do was kind of create a few beachheads across Ireland and the UK before the legislation changed. So that means we wanted to get university campus trials. So that was quite difficult, and that was quite, just took a long time. And I suppose that was the patience piece was the challenge in the first year. And then the challenges changed pretty quickly. I think the second challenge was that we experienced like pretty rapid growth. So when the legislation did change, in the space of 3 months, we grew our team from around 1 to 20 people. So going from working by yourself to working on a team of 20, there's a lot of kind of time that needs to be dedicated to putting the structures in place to make sure that people aren't tripping over each other and all that kind of stuff. So that, again, it was all manageable, but it was definitely a challenge. There were definitely a small period there where people kind of were tripping over each other, and putting that structure in place was invaluable in the early days, and it will stand to us kind of going forward as well. Fundraising has also been, I wouldn't say a challenge, but it has been a challenge, but it's just been a very new experience. So we've raised just over 2.1 million to date in the last kind of 18 months. And that has definitely been kind of a new learning curve for me, but something I'm really enjoying, and it's part of the business I do enjoy.
Yeah, no, we've noticed and we've kind of tracked your success there. You obviously used Spark crowdfunding for one of the rounds of investment, and I think that was a stellar success in terms of that campaign, so well done on that. A number of our cohort have kind of recently gone through that as well, so it seems to be a very popular way of sourcing kind of growth capital for early stage companies. Obviously, as you kind of grow out the business now, your capital requirements are going to increase. So have you any thoughts on kind of future rounds of fundraising and how you might go about doing that?
Yeah, sure. I think the Spark was great. We had raised kind of $1 million before that, and we raised $1 million, and then we were kind of saying, let's go straight to the Series A. But, we thought there was a lot more that we could prove before we went out and raised a larger round. So, for example, we wanted to prove that we could win formal, procurement processes against these large other scooter sharing companies. We wanted to prove that we could expand beyond the UK. We wanted to show that we could be profitable in the markets we were going after. We wanted to prove that we could compete head to head in markets that already have scooter sharing. So there's a lot of things that we wanted to do before raising that Series A. So we kind of said, let's raise, another $1 million of a bridge round. And we did that, 50% through Spark and 50% through other angel investors. And the process for Spark was great. It was, I suppose, pretty seamless, and it was quick. Our growth opportunities were imminent, and angel investment and crowdfunding is a lot quicker than the kind of typical institutional investment route. So that's kind of why we went down that route. And it's also nice for us to kind of for our customers to own a little piece of Zipp. It kind of builds that brand loyalty as well. So when you have a B2C offering, crowdfunding kind of suits that. But yeah, future funding, we're definitely going to require more capital. I think it's going to be probably a feature for a little while. It will be equity and debt, and then with the goal of eventually just being able to use debt to grow in the future. So we plan to raise a Series A at the moment, or we're kind of in the early stages of getting that together. And we're looking at a couple of kind of M&A options that might boost that as well. So it's a couple of things going on, but yeah, we're planning on raising a Series A in the first half of this year.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Just on very recent travels overseas, I've noticed the increased popularity in certain cities with e-scooters, but also quite a lot of competition on different providers. So do you think, we're getting to a stage now where there will probably be a little bit of rationalization in the market? And, are you likely to participate in any M&A activity around that?
Yeah. I think that it's the way the market's going. Like, if you look at what's happened, there's been a huge number of acquisitions. It started off kind of in 2018. There was some of the US players were buying up some of the smaller ones, but there's been kind of more strategic, not more strategic, but there's been in the last kind of 5 or 6 months, we've seen a lot more acquisitions again. So it's kind of ramping up. I think that, there is a finite number of cities across the world. So the way this is going to work is probably similar to telecoms. Like, there's going to be lots of smaller operators, and eventually there will be a huge amount of consolidation, and inorganic growth will be a big part of the micromobility space, I think. We're not looking to get out just yet. I think we have a lot more to prove. So, but yeah, we are still looking at kind of M&A options now for that kind of inorganic growth for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dissimilar to the renewable energy market that I'm familiar with. We're probably in the land grab stage. It's actually getting out there and getting particular cities signed up. So what markets are you active in the moment, and what are the next additions? Yeah,
so we're in 8 markets at the moment, 3 in Poland, in kind of Katowice and the surrounding metropolitan area. We're in 5 locations in the UK, so 3 across Buckinghamshire and 2 in Somerset. And yeah, we're kind of continuing to grow our footprint in the UK. We're launching in Ireland quite soon, and we are also looking at the Spanish and Portuguese markets very closely, which I hope to plan again in the first half, or plan to launch in the first half of the year as well. So Lots of stuff going on. I can't give too much detail, but that's probably as much as I can give for now. Yeah.
But just curiously, I mean, Poland isn't the obvious kind of market for an Irish startup to kind of go after. I mean, lots of them typically will look at the UK and possibly even the US then before moving into other European markets. How did the Polish opportunity come about?
I suppose our head of European expansion had previously launched there. So he previously worked for another scooter sharing company and launched around 20,000 scooters across Europe. And with that, he's kind of got a decent amount of experience in all the different markets. And we saw Poland as a bit of a dark horse. We also have advisors that run businesses in Poland as well that are very close to the business. So we kind of had a bit of insider knowledge there, and we kind of identified a couple of markets that we think are, you know, low competition and we're definitely going to be viable. So that was kind of it. And you know, yes, that's how we managed to choose Poland as our next market.
Perfect. Well, we wish you continued success with that. Eshna, I might bring you in here just to talk a little bit more about the micromobility market and particularly the sustainability aspect of that.
I think one of the questions that I have when we were talking about the UK market is, has the consumer pattern changed much since the pandemic? And because you launched there last year and it's a trial right now. So did you see the consumers, did you have repetitive consumers coming in for subscription model again and again? How is the consumer pattern right now?
Yeah, we have we've had around 45,000 people use use the service. We have over 20,000 kind of regular users. We've had hundreds of thousands of journeys. So, you know, we've definitely seen a slight modal shift. We've seen around 35% of the journeys that are taken based on surveys that we've carried out have actually replaced cars. So 35% of journeys would have been cars if that scooter sharing option wasn't there. So we are seeing modal shift, and, you know, we do estimate that we've taken a huge number of car journeys, off the roads, or so I think it's been a great start so far, and really excited to kind of hopefully expand and continue to replace those car journeys. So yeah, it's been great. And yeah, we another kind of pattern that we've seen is at the start, when you launch a scooter sharing scheme, there's this thing called the hype curve, which is essentially like a huge number of people using them at the very start, just for the crack. Some people just using them in the evening and they're using them for 1, 2, 3 hours. So that's kind of something that we saw at the start, and a huge number of people use them, and then a certain portion of those people go, actually, you know what, I can actually use this for my commute. So we've seen a lot of journeys change from kind of 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. and now they're kind of a lot more of the journeys are 7, 8, 9 in the morning, lunchtime, and the rush hours, you know. So that's kind of means that people are actually using them for practical journeys and not just for a bit of fun with their friends.
Do you have a similar time frame for all the cities? I think I saw somewhere you operate between 5 o'clock and 10:30 in the night. So do you have the same clocking hours for all the cities now, or do you have a different model for each city?
It actually changes. You know, we like to kind of tailor our schemes to meet like the specific needs of each local authority. For example, in Poland, we saw a lot more commuters in the very, very early hours, the 5 a.m. So we kind of started a little bit early in Poland. We see a lot more people out at night in Poland, going for dinner a little bit later, things like that. So we've kind of extended the hours in Poland to a little bit later and starting a little bit earlier in the morning. We changed the hours during the pandemics, like when the pubs were closing a little bit earlier, we were turning the service off a little bit earlier and stuff like that, just because, we don't want people coming out of nightclubs on these things. So we kind of try and keep it dynamic while, we need to make it consistent, so we don't want to be changing them every day. But yeah, we would tailor the operating hours to meet the needs of the specific region rather than just putting a blanket term on it, because every market is a little bit different.
Yeah, micromobility usually comes with the tag that, there could be a bit of a cluttering on the sidewalks, or it could be a bit chaotic on the road, even though it does have a lot of upside to it. How do you monitor the behavior? So you do have a place where you say drunk and driving is not allowed. So how do you monitor the behavior after 10 o'clock in some of these cities that riding is still safe? Yes,
there's a couple of things there. Like, I think, a lot of other scooter sharing companies would keep the scooters on 24/7. And, I know of people that have had accidents at 4 o'clock in the morning where there's 2 people on the scooter and it's reckless. And I think the operator does have some kind of, the operator or the business has some kind of responsibility to not let that happen. I don't think... I think that the risk versus reward of keeping the scooters on between 3 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the morning are just not worth it. So anyway, I think, so just to answer your question, how do we stop people drink driving after hours? We simply turn the scooters off. So we disable the service so that in the middle of the night, people actually aren't able to get onto the scooter. When it comes to, cluttering the streets, and this is a really interesting one. I kind of alluded to it at the start where I said that there was a lot of room for improvement with other scooter sharing companies. One of the things that we looked to solve was this problem of scooter littering. And this is where users can pick up the scooter anywhere and drop it off anywhere. So that's great for the user's perspective because they can put it right in their driveway and throw it in their bush or whatever. But it causes massive problems as well. It's problematic for the elderly. Blocking the footpaths is problematic for people in wheelchairs. It's very problematic for people with visual impairments because they can't see them and they trip over them. So what we've done differently is we actually have designated parking bays in every market we enter. This is where they're essentially painted parking bays outside of where people would normally walk, and you have to start and end your journey from those locations, and we use GPS technology to enable that. So if you try and end your ride outside of one of these parking bays, it will say go to your nearest parking bay, it's over there. So that's kind of one of the many things that we've done to kind of live by our mission of what we like to call mobility done right. So just trying to make it, I suppose, a little bit more sustainable and recognize that there's kind of three stakeholders that we need to keep happy. I think a lot of other scooter sharing companies focus on the user and the user alone. We also recognize that when you're putting in a transport system into a city, you need to also respect the local council, the user themselves, and also the other people in the city that don't use them. And I think that's a really, really important part that people miss. Just keeping those three stakeholders happy is essentially the key to creating a kind of sustainable transport system in a city, especially with micromobility.
Yeah, could I just ask a follow-on question to that, Charlie? Because there's a parallel in the energy sector where there's lots of barriers put in place and lots of accusations placed at the new entrant, the renewable energy, where the incumbents, the fossil fuel guys, haven't had to deal with this. So when you're having to deal with issues about the littering on the pavements and everything else, but yet you walk through any city in the world and there'll be cars parked up on footpaths, causing all the same issues, but people seem to be mostly blind to that because they're used to it.
Yeah.
And then the new entrant, e-scooters or e-bikes, have to kind of deal with all of those issues.
Yeah, like it is funny. I don't want to try tear down other modes of transport because it's not necessarily the reason we're doing what we're doing, but it's funny when people say oh Jesus, scooters are dangerous, they're death traps.
Yeah.
But there's people on scramblers, there's people on motorbikes going 100 miles an hour. There's and cars have a higher fatality rate, and obviously there's pros and cons to both, but essentially it's just new, and new technologies always get slammed. When cars were first around, there was someone walking with a white flag in front of the car to make sure that it wasn't going to hit anyone, and that's obviously changed. We saw in the 1800s bicycles were banned from San Francisco for being too dangerous. So things just change. And new technologies will take a bit of time. But that being said, it's really important, and there is a responsibility on someone like me or a company like Zipp to do it right. And I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely. I think between ride sharing, private fleets, last mile delivery, the micromobility sector has grown significantly over the last few years. And there is no doubt that it comes with a tag of sustainability. And it is definitely a more convenient point-to-point transformation as well. How is Zipp playing on the sustainability front? How do you recycle your bikes, or what do you do with broken bikes and the batteries? What is the life cycle of the product usually?
So just on the sustainability piece again, really, really important. In the early days of scooter sharing, it was one of the things again that we saw was that they weren't as sustainable as people initially thought. The useful life of the asset was very, very short. So extending the useful life of the asset was a big deal, and something that's really, really important to get right. Secondly, another thing was that the scooters didn't have swappable batteries, so you'd have to bring the scooter back to a warehouse, charge it overnight, redistribute it the next day. And then the third thing was that the vehicles that were being used to charge and redistribute them were often diesel trucks. So there was a few things there that we thought we could improve. So the first is that all of our vehicles that we use to redistribute the bikes and the scooters are electric vans and electric cargo bikes. The second thing is that all of our vehicles have swappable batteries. So, instead of bringing the scooter back to a warehouse, charging it overnight, redistributing it the next day, we simply go out to the scooters on the streets and replace the dead battery packs and go back. So, that's the second thing. And then the third thing is the useful life of the asset. other scooter sharing companies used kind of older scooters, or they were actually just B2C scooters with a few tweaks, and they were literally snapping on the streets after 6 weeks. So what we are doing differently is we've just gone with the most robust model in the world. These things are used kind of aircraft grade aluminium, and they last around 4 years rather than kind of 6 weeks. And there is that kind of idea that you can keep a broomstick for 20 years if you keep replacing the handle of the brush, and that's kind of what we're going for. We're always just using the, I suppose, repair or replacing parts and maintaining those parts that have broken and fixing them and getting them back into the vehicles and continuing that cycle. So that's kind of the most important thing for us right now. We've kind of, thankfully, I think it's around 94% of the scooters that we purchased around 18 months ago are still on the streets, which is a phenomenal track record compared to a lot of other scooter sharing companies. And yeah, I suppose right now we're kind of developing that end of life plan as well to make sure that every single part that can be recycled or reused is being recycled and reused. So
that's wonderful. I think one of the features of your bike also has those auto sanitizing handlebar apps. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I suppose this was a temporary measure, I guess. It was for, when we were deep in the pandemic and people were afraid of public transport. We don't actually use them anymore. Okay. We kind of just encourage people to sanitize their hands and wash their hands. But they were essentially these nanoseptic wraps that kind of there's like self-sanitizing handlebars that reduce COVID-19 transmission by around 99.98% or something like that. But they were a little bit tricky operationally. So I suppose once we kind of had a conversation with the council when we were coming out of lockdown to say, do you mind if we stop using these right now? And they were kind of happy to agree. The bus doesn't have them, the people, they don't have them in the shop. So we were kind of saying, yeah, we just want to encourage people to wash their hands and it should be fine.
Yeah, I think one of the last questions from me, and then I'll just pass it over to Joe, is around the regulation aspect. What do you think are the challenges or the pain points that you still need to solve to make this business more disruptive and just get into the game, whether it's aligning with the policymakers or, aligning with the regulatory landscape?
We would be one of the few scooter sharing companies that fights for more regulation. So, we would perform best in heavily regulated markets because, and we are lobbying the government to make sure that any scooter sharing company that does launch in Ireland is very heavily regulated. And the reason behind that is because, we've seen the mistakes that a lot of companies in the US and a lot of cities in the US and mainland Europe have made, and we kind of want to make sure that Ireland avoid those problems. We're quite protective over the Irish market. We want it to be mobility done right. So yeah, with that we kind of be calling for strict parking regulations. We'd want very, very high vehicle standards. We don't want people coming in here with scooters that are going to break and that are not sustainable and things like that. So I suppose the scooter standards is quite high. The regulation around safety, operating hours, the parking, all that kind of thing will be central, and that'll be at a kind of a government and local government level. So yeah, they're kind of the main things, I think.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Aishna. Terry, just go back to the business. Your kind of revenue model. So your client is really local authorities. Is that exclusively the market you're after?
Yeah, so some people call us B2C and some call us B2G. The revenue that we generate is from the customer. So the way we charge, our pricing model is €1 or pound to get on the scooter and 15 cent or p then per minute thereafter. So for a 10-minute journey, it costs around €2.50 or £2.50. Well, I'll talk in pounds because it's we're up and around the UK, so £2.50. So, but that being said, the local authorities are the gatekeepers to winning business. So we will always go through the local authority before we launch. We have seen scooter sharing companies across the world asking for forgiveness rather than permission. So that would be an example of that would be us launching 1,000 scooters in Dublin tomorrow night and waking up and the council having to deal with it after and us negotiating from there. But that's not the way to do it because, that's doing things on our terms and that doesn't take into account all of the things that I spoke about in terms of getting buy-in from the local community and all the different stakeholders before you actually launch. So it's very important to us that, everyone is comfortable and everyone wants this to go ahead, and we've listened to the council and shaped the scheme and made it how they want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So local authority relationships are always going to be really, really important, and we will be going to them to ultimately launch the scheme. There are other business models that we have that are kind of, we don't need so much buy-in from the local authority. For example, we've launched Zipp Zero. So Zipp Zero is a long-term delivery bike or long-term e-bike rental for delivery drivers. So you spoke about the rise of the gig economy, the rise in Q-commerce and food delivery. A lot of these employees are gig economy workers, and often rely on regular push bikes to deliver food, and you're cycling for 9 hours. It's not very efficient. So what we are doing is we're trying to disrupt that by providing a kind of a weekly subscription where people can rent an electric bike per week. They can use it to make their deliveries, and they can make more deliveries and make more money out of it. So that's kind of the sell, and it's going quite well so far. For example, that wouldn't need any local authority engagement. That's just a pure kind of B2 gig economy worker.
Sure, yeah.
Or like mobility as a subscription, as they call it these
yes,
days.
Exactly, that's it, yeah.
Again, my past experience, I always found the UK a very easy place for an Irish business to get established and to do business. It's always Irish business are very well received in the UK, and obviously you've had some good success over there. Has Brexit caused any disruption in that?
Not really. I think we've definitely really enjoyed working in the UK. I think that when you are an Irish company going to a UK local authority, it's almost as if you're a UK company going to a UK local authority. So that's been great, and they've been extremely welcoming, and yeah, we've had great dealings in the UK so far. I think logistics, shipping and stuff like that into the UK, it's been different, but it's been okay. It's been fine. So we haven't seen any major disruption through Brexit yet. Anyway. Okay,
that's good to hear. Zipp Mobility and particularly your colleague Will O'Brien were good enough to help out Kildare County Council in their recent Climate and Energy Awareness Week. So I got to have a spin on one of your scooters, and even as a 50-year-old man, as soon as I got on it, and I was apprehensive, I didn't want to give it back.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's your experience with lots of other customers. And again, I witnessed this overseas, the age range of people using e-scooters. It's from as young as they're let to really as to up to any age. So hopefully we're at the tipping point or close to the tipping point where you get wide acceptance.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at electric scooters and they go, oh, that's there for kids, or they're for people in their early 20s, and that's it. But that's not really the case at all. Like there's a primetime piece a couple of years ago, and they were talking about people on electric scooters in Dublin, and they were particularly focusing on people that were kind of over 40. They seemed, they had the income to buy the vehicles, and they were also, a lot of them, previously used to cycle, and they don't want to cycle anymore or whatever. So there was kind of, there's a huge range of people. We've had training days in the UK, and the average age would be in their 50s. We've had people that are in their 70s and 80s hop up on the Zipp scooters and love the service. So it is definitely not something that's restricted to young people. I remember there was one girl at a training day, or one lady at a training day, and I think she was 79, and she was like, oh, I used to rollerblade to work, and this feels like when I used to rollerblade to work. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's great, and it is for everyone. And I think mobility done right means that you need to create a service that is suitable for everyone, not just a small cohort of people.
Yeah, there's another big trend in mobility as a service, and that's actually for cars, the Go Car model. And there's some recent planning consents have been granted here where traditionally more car parking spaces would have been required. That was overcome by having a Go Car port there, so there's essentially it's a shared transport infrastructure, and it allowed the development to go ahead, although there's a small footprint on the site. Immediately behind us here, we have a very large site that was turned down for refused for planning permission, and one of the main issues being that not enough car parking spaces were provided for. So I think there is going to be a major move. I mean, I probably bought my last car. I probably will move to a shared mobility infrastructure. So I think you're in the right place at the right time. Some of your competitors have obviously gone scooters, bikes, and are now into cars, some of the big international players. Do you see that as being something that Zipp Mobility might look to in the future?
Absolutely. I think just on the planning permission and the parking piece, we have teamed up with property developers in Ireland and the UK when going for planning, where they kind of say, well, look, we will have, shared spaces, and as well as that, we will have shared micromobility spaces for electric bikes and electric scooters going forward. In Ireland, it's a little bit more, well, we expect this to happen in the future. In the UK, it's, okay, well, we've had developers put in, cement scooter parking bays, which have been great. So, I think it definitely is going to be, micromobility considered from day one in property development is going to be really important. So really excited for that to kind of grow out. In terms of like our multimodality, we've got electric scooters at the moment. We are launching electric bikes very soon. shared electric bikes. And yeah, like I think we will expand into other modes of transport. Some of it will be in-house and some of it will be through partnerships. So for example, like we partnered with Free Now, so Zipp and Free Now announced our partnership in January there. And what essentially that will mean is that Zipp's electric scooters and electric bikes will be available on the Free Now platform. So we're not launching a taxi service, but we can still integrate and have, you know, a multimodal app where there's already hundreds of thousands of people with the Free Now app in Ireland, and when they go onto that, they'll be able to avail of a Zipp e-scooter, an e-bike, to facilitate those shorter journeys, or for a longer journey they can get into a taxi. So like I think we will be multimodal in a few different ways, some of which through partnerships and some of which will be building out our own service too.
Yeah, very exciting times. Listen, thanks for that, Charlie. I'm just wondering, Alan, are there any questions coming in from anybody online? If not, I suppose a few more comments again back to the business and your immediate next steps, Charlie, from where you're at the moment. You alluded to some additional fundraising to fuel the expansion. Obviously, with that will come additional recruitment, presumably. So, what do you see as kind of your next hires?
Yeah, so we've got a few kind of big hires coming. I think a lot of them will be kind of around, I suppose, European general managers. We've got someone coming in, hopefully, to look after the kind of Zipp Zero side of the house, which is the e-bikes for delivery drivers, and a few more up our sleeves. In terms of announcements, yeah, look, we're looking at fundraising right now, hoping to raise a Series A, which will close before the first half of the year, which is exciting. And as I said, there's a couple of M&A prospects that we're looking forward to hopefully getting over the line and announcing pretty soon too. In terms of our expansion, we're going to be doubling down in the UK. And yeah, I think as much as I can give, we'll be launching in Spain as well in the first half of this year. So lots of little things going on, juggling lots of balls, but really enjoying it. Excellent.
Look, we wish you every success with that. MERITS here is an incubation centre for tech startups. So we work very closely with the local enterprise office. We're also funded by Enterprise Ireland to kind of support tech companies and try and build a pipeline of high potential startups. During Zipp's couple of years in existence, you have a relationship with Enterprise Ireland and also with Nova UCD as a good place to start a business. So could you tell us a little bit about how you've benefited from those type of supports from Nova UCD and AI?
Sure. Yeah, Nova have been great. I think when I said that I finished up college and went straight into Nova UCD I went into Nova UCD to kind of give it a shot. There's a huge amount of support that we were able to avail of, and we got lots of support through accelerator programs. We did 2 different accelerators, and also a lot of connections that we made through the kind of the network that they have, and brought us to people to kind of become investor ready, if that makes sense. And then they were also really helpful with connections to universities, obviously, and stuff like that. So yeah, they've been great. They've been great on the PR side of things as well. They would be happy to kind of, if we've got a story or an announcement, they always help us to push it. So they've been great. Yeah, all around they've been excellent. We've also got a lot of help from Enterprise Ireland. Enterprise Ireland have we've availed a few different grants. They've also come in on a few of our funding rounds as well. So they've been unbelievable, and they've been unbelievable with our international expansion as well. Enterprise Ireland Network, I thought it was an Irish thing. It's not, it's completely international. And if we're saying we want to launch in Abu Dhabi, they'll say, yeah, I'll get you on the phone with someone tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? So it's really, really helpful. So they've been excellent. We've also got good support from, the Dublin Business Innovation Centre as well. Martin Murray in there really helped us in the very early days, and he's someone that I can still pick up the phone to and has been great. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you're looking to start a business, I've done the whole trying to start a business in your bedroom by yourself, and it's just nowhere near as efficient or effective or as motivating as trying to join an accelerator program where you're surrounded by like-minded people who've seen this 100 times and will ask you the questions and that you need to hear, and you'll figure things out 100 times quicker. You'll figure out the gaps or the things you haven't thought about so much faster if you're surrounded by people that are doing this day in, day out. So yeah, I would definitely recommend kind of an accelerator program. I would recommend anyone looking to start a business, I suppose, to be patient as well. As I said, it took a very long time to kind of get it together, but no time wasted. And then the last thing I'd probably say is I would also any young person or anyone looking to start a business, they should really know their market, because that really gives you the chance to, I suppose if you know the market better than anyone else, you will see opportunities that other people can't. So that's definitely something that I would also recommend. So just read up, talk to as many people as you can, and yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, very strong advice there. And in addition to the Enterprise Ireland network, I also found the embassies of Ireland around the world very good at getting introductory meetings going, and particularly attendance at their events, and the ability to bring target clients of yours to events at Irish embassies around the world certainly helps get some of those sales across the line.
The Department for International Trade in the UK have been really helpful for us. Sure. We've met with the British ambassador as well in Ireland, who's really, really helpful as well. So they're really welcoming bunch, and I think there is such strong ties between Ireland and the UK, and it is still, in my opinion, very easy to do business there.
Yeah, it's one of the real downsides of COVID is that he had to suspend his garden party in Glenveigh House the last couple of years. Eshna, a couple of questions coming in?
Yes, we do. So one of the first few questions we have is, how do you view remote working, and have you hired people outside of Ireland?
Great question. Remote working is really interesting. We hired our first maybe 5 or 6 or 7 people remotely. There was a stage where when we started meeting up to work, we were actually we didn't have an office, so we were, as I said, Gleeson's is the family business, and there's kind of a small hotel upstairs. So there's about 5 or 6 of us cramped into one hotel room writing tenders. So that was a really interesting experience. But very soon after, we moved back into Nova UCD. But how have I found remote working? I think it's great. I think that every single company that starts from here on out will have remote working, or will need to have remote working. I love the crack in the office. I think we've got a great team, and we do have great fun. So that's the side that we're lucky that everyone wants to come into the office, but it's very, very flexible. We don't really have this, you need to be in your desk at 9 o'clock. Like, we trust the people that work for Zipp, and we trust that they'll get their work done. Do we hire people outside of Ireland? Yeah, we've got people in Ireland. I'd say more than about 50% of our staff are outside of Ireland. So we've got, a group in Ireland. We've got a group in the UK. We have people in Portugal, Poland, and Spain as well. I think it definitely makes sense for us to have people in the markets that we're going after, out there meeting the local authorities and stuff like that. So we have around 25 people or so right now, and probably only 10 or so in the Dublin office, and then everyone else is kind of in the markets that we're actually operating in, which kind of, I suppose, makes sense.
It makes sense, absolutely. And one of the other questions we have is, would you consider including wheelchair accessible scooters in the offering?
We would. I think it would be a slightly different model. It wouldn't be a case of going up to it on the side of the street and scanning a QR code, but it would be more a long-term model where we could provide different mobility options to people, and they would rent them long-term, or it might even make more sense for them to buy them. It's not something that we will be building in-house, but it's definitely something that will kind of make it fully encompassing, if that makes sense. We've seen other scooter sharing companies early stage trying to do that. And it wouldn't be, we haven't done a huge amount of work on it right now, but it is definitely something that we're talking about and looking forward to hopefully do when we have the bandwidth in the company and the resources.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions coming in? Sorry,
Eshna, just on that, look, I'd encourage you, as you look to kind of the accessibility issue, I'd encourage you to have a conversation with Matt McCann from Access Earth. It's a Kildare-based business that is kind of leading the way on a whole host of disability issues. So I think there might be some synergies there. And he's also a Spark crowdfund alumni, I guess, having closed his round there recently himself, and Donald McLean. Sorry, Eshna, you want another question?
I was just going to continue on the micromobility aspect of it. So where is micromobility going next, and what's next for Zipp in the next couple of weeks, I would say?
I think micromobility is, it's a very broad term, and right now people think scooters, but I think there are so many different vehicles that will eventually fall into the micromobility category. I think there's going to be a huge amount of shared and privately owned vehicles. I think we're going to see huge development in both. I think the vehicles is probably where we're going to see the biggest change. I kind of, when I think about what does micromobility look like in 2040, I'm thinking of something that's as comfortable as a BMW but fits in a cycle lane. Do you know what I mean? I think that there will be kind of luxury micromobility, because I think right now there's this big, people that have a decent disposable income, often kind of shy away from electric bikes and electric scooters unless they're particularly active or outdoorsy. And I think that is something that will change and will need to change, because once the infrastructure starts to kind of move towards micromobility, like we've seen a huge number of cycle lanes being introduced all over Europe, and as becomes less space for cars, people will be looking to kind of avail of those quicker options. And if we can make it more comfortable, not that it's not comfortable now, but I think we can make it more comfortable, especially in places like Ireland where the weather is like it is. So I think there'll be a huge development in the vehicles themselves, and ultimately a massive reduction in car ownership. We're kind of at a point right now where people are waking up to the climate crisis, and they're realizing that micromobility is the solution, but it does have a long way to go, and it is only one part of a puzzle. I think that micromobility fills the gaps that public transport doesn't fill. So in the short term, micromobility is going to develop hugely, and in the longer term, so will kind of the public transport infrastructure, and our reliance on cars will be reduced. So that's kind of the goal. Ultimately, our goal is to get cars off the road, and any way that we can kind of work towards that and increase the number of car journeys we're taking off the roads, we're going to explore that avenue.
I absolutely swear by public transport, and I can't wait to see Zipp scooters around here in Naas, just to come from the station up to MERITS.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're strong advocates for that, Charlie. We totally agree with what you've said. I mean, we're very keen on getting an e-scooter or an e-bike connection between here and Salons and Naas train station, so everybody can come and go here without having to bother about turning on the fossil fuel car. So,
for sure.
Look, as I said earlier, you're in the right place at the right time. You've been an absolute gentleman to talk to. Thanks for giving your time so generously. We wish you every success in the future, and if there's anything we can do here at MERITS to support that in any way, don't be shy about reaching out. Okay, folks, we're going to draw that to a close then. What I would ask everybody is to check out our website, merits.ie, and you'll get links there to all our social media outlets. So please do follow us, and we're particularly keen to hear from people about any suggestions they may have for future speakers. So as I said, this is going to be a series. We're going to do monthly talks with founders of tech companies. So we started with a good one. So you've set a very high standard there, Charlie. So if there's any other either tech founders out there that want a platform to come and talk to us, or if people out there have any other suggestions, feel free to contact us through social media or through the website. So I just want to say a few thank yous. The person off screen here, Alan Joyce, has played an absolute blinder in getting this studio set up in a short space of time. So thanks, Alan, very much for your time, and also to my colleague Eshna for contributing to setting up today's events. Just want to acknowledge Enterprise Ireland and Kildare Local Enterprise Office as well. They're our long-established supporters. We're funded by Enterprise Ireland and the Economic Development Budget from Kildare County Council. So thanks to everybody involved there in funding us to do what we do. So with that, we'll say goodbye and look forward to talking to you again at the next event.